All right, good evening to everyone. Welcome to the Monday, November 28th, 2022 meeting of the Falls Church City Council. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome you all here, and we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And I'm wondering if we have any volunteers to help lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Do we have any volunteers? Do the things light up, by the way, just out of curiosity? Yes. All right, light it up. Let's get this party started here. All right, let's all rise, and we'll have these young ladies join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is right there, and I'm going to go ahead and, you guys ready?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, that was a great job. How about coming forward? I've got some pins, some Falls Church pins. Would you guys like some pins? All right, why don't we all, maybe we can all stand and get a picture together. You guys want a pin? All right. Whoop, hang on, slow down.
Hey, Jeff.
All right, we're all out. I'm sorry.
Right here. We'll line everybody
Here
up
you
in
go.
the front and take a picture.
Sure, you're welcome. There you go. Sure. There you go. All right, well, did you already get one? All right, there you go. All right. Do we have a troop leader who wants to join us at the party?
We have two troops.
Troop leaders? All right, come on up. You guys were just at the party, weren't you? All right. Okay, so Madam Clerk, will you call roll at your convenience?
I will. Ms. Conley?
Here.
Mr. Duncan?
Here.
Ms. Hardy?
Here.
Ms. Leon?
Here.
Ms. Shantz-Hiscott?
Here.
Mr. Snyder?
Here.
And Mayor Tarter?
Here.
Thank you, Council.
All right. Do we have a motion regarding the the meeting agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt the meeting agenda.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. It doesn't look like there are any proclamations tonight. Is that correct?
You're correct.
All right. How about any oaths of office to administer?
None this evening, thank you.
Okay, let's keep moving. How about receipt of public comment? Do you want to summarize the written comments?
Certainly. So we had several comments about the 20-mile-per-hour speed limit. Henri Bartholomew urged council to adopt traffic calming measures selectively only where there is a demonstrated need and where benefits will exceed the cost. Matthew Werner of 513 Timber Lane believes that more enforcement rather than decreasing the speed limit is needed. Danny Polinsky of 201 Patterson Street asks that council not adopt reduced speed limits, but focus on creating pedestrian lanes that are separate from automobile traffic. As far as the T-zones that's being considered by the Planning Commission at one of their meetings that's coming up soon, Will Below and Dan Ayer of North Lee Street expressed concern about the proposed changes to the T-zones. The Urban Forestry Commission requested $58,300 to hire a consulting arborist urban forester to inventory the trees located in the city's right-of-way along streets. And I believe Amy Crumpton is here to speak about that during public comment tonight from the Urban Forestry Commission.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank
Let's move
you.
on now to receipt of public comment. That's for folks in the room tonight or on the internet. Is there any member or anyone who's signed up to speak, Madam Clerk?
Yes, we have Joseph Shirizzi from Gundry Drive.
Is that the only speaker?
And then we have Amy Crumpton from the Urban Forestry Commission.
Got it, okay. All right, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening. I'm Joseph Shirizzi. I live on Gundry Drive. On April 9th, 2021, my friend Jim Pagels was hit and killed by a driver in a car while biking home from getting his COVID shot. Hours before his preventable death, the last message he sent out sarcastically said this: "Had to bike through a roundabout over a highway to get my COVID jab. Lifespan maximalization function is clearly well calibrated." Those were the last thing that he ever sent. 100 Americans a day are dying unnecessary traffic deaths in this country, well beyond other developed countries due to antiquated road laws and poor design. Basically, in every other country you could compare development with, streets are getting safer, and here in Virginia, they are getting more dangerous each year as cars are bigger, heavier, faster, and being driven by more distracted drivers. Washington, D.C. has already lowered default speed limits to 20 miles an hour. Lowering default speed limits across the city can absolutely save lives for no material costs at all. 90% of people hit by cars moving 30 miles an hour or less survive. The majority of people hit by cars moving 40 plus are killed. Data shows traffic deaths increase exponentially with speed over 20 miles an hour. We have to get people to get used to driving slower, especially in larger cars, and get used to driving 20 miles an hour in our city. Please do not let traffic calming be just a buzzword. Please support lowering default speed limits in Cross Falls Church. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Madam Clerk?
Sorry,
right.
my mic wasn't on. Amy Crumpton from the Urban Forestry Commission.
There I'm on.
There
Okay.
you go.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Amy Crumpton, and I live on West Marshall Street. I am chair of the city's Urban Forestry Commission, and am here before you on behalf of the commission to respectfully amend our request that the Falls Church City Council allocate funds to the city arborist to hire an ISA certified consultant to inventory the city's trees. This amended request is for $58,300 to allow the arborist to hire a consulting arborist to inventory the city's trees located in the city's right-of-way along our streets. Presently, a majority of the city's tree inventory data is 9 to 18 years old. The current inventory provides tree locations but cannot be used easily to assess health conditions broadly of the city's trees or help the city arborist determine future work for the city's operations crew and the contract tree work budget that's needed. As an urban forestry best management practice, tree inventories should be updated every 5 to 10 years to provide an accurate management tool. An inventory collects information on species, size, and health of trees, and assesses whether maintenance or removal is required on trees that may pose risk to public safety. An updated tree inventory will allow the city arborist and the city's new urban forester to properly prioritize high and moderate risk trees without relying on citizen reporting or responding to tree failures after the fact. New data also will allow them to better track maintenance and proper pruning on young trees and more accurately identify sites to plant new trees to ensure that planting is equitable across the city. The previous UFC request to council on September 6th was for $100,000 to cover an inventory for all of the city's approximately 12,336 trees located on the city's public lands. This amended request to first inventory the street trees as a subset of all the public trees allows the city arborist to begin a long overdue task fundamental to the management of the city's urban forestry program. And also, it is a fundamental task that the city relies on as trees are part of our green infrastructure to mitigate the effects of urban heat, pollution, and stormwater exacerbated by climate change. The UFC will continue to support the city arborist in requesting additional funds in future budget cycles to complete an inventory of all the city's public trees. On behalf of the Urban Forestry Commission, I thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members, for your time and attention to this request. Thanks.
All right, thank you, and thank you for all the hard work you do on behalf of the city. Do we have any other speakers, Madam Clerk?
Not at this time.
Okay, anyone on the internet?
No, sir. We do have a report from the Recreation and Parks Board on Fellows Park during public comment.
We do indeed. And Mr. Slit is in the back. Danny, do you want to come on forward? Charlie O'Hara. Oh, Charlie's going to do it. Okay, Charlie.
Glad to be in your new digs. I'm Charlie O'Hara, 2717 Welcome Drive, Falls Church, here on behalf of the Advisory Board on Recreation and Parks. Since 1999, the advisory board has been tasked, excuse me, with creating master plans for the city's parks, and we're here today to present you with one for the city's newest park, and that's the Fellows property. This process began in 2020, right when we all went into our abodes and stayed there for 2 years. So most of these gathering was done through our Zoom meetings with neighborhoods. We had public hearings, we had surveys, we had presentations from Arlington County, we had presentations from Fairfax County. We met with urban agricultural people, all to try to gather the information necessary to present this plan to you. It's a culmination of numerous meetings. When we were finally able to go on site and meet healthily, we did so. We've observed the park, met with the neighbors, met with the professionals, and we present this report. It's consistent with both of our parks. We're inconsistent with most of our parks. What's being asked for here is not a whole lot of change. What the people want is it to be basically to stay in a similar situation. But we're recommending some improvements to the park. One of those is park access. Right now, the only access is off of Oak. We'd like to see access to the park off of both Fellows and Parker. We're requesting that there be trails around so people can safely and easily get around the park itself. We're proposing signage, interpretive signage, to a minimal degree, not to overwhelm the park. There's specimen trees on site. Let's designate them. Let's do them with natural designation. We'd like to see some urban agriculture to the extent it can be incorporated into the design of the park. This is, even though it's 1.9 acres, it's one of the larger ones we'll get. It's not really large enough to do a whole lot of urban agriculture. We looked at community gardens, not enough space there to really be cost effective for the cost benefit analysis. Because of the nature of this park, we'd also like you to consider a natural play area. We're not talking about adding plastic playground equipment, but logs that can be stepped on, climbed on, some kind of a natural climbing wall that can be used. This park should not be limited to passive use. There needs to be some kind of active use in there. There's a well on the property. The hope is that we'll be able to use the well. One of the ideas that it had is to create some kind of a mud table where the kids from the schools or the neighborhood can play in water, play with equipment, but it's a natural setting for all of that. We're also would like to see a resource education area in there. Basically we have two beautiful natural areas within, shouting distance of Oak Street Elementary. You have the Howard E. Herman Park, and now you have the Fellows property. Either one of those could be used as a residential, resource education area for the kids to go over and observe nature in its natural setting. We've also recommended the removal of the stormwater facility that was placed by the prior owner when the development of this property was expected to take place. If you've seen the property, a huge swath of trees was taken out, stormwater piping put in. We recommend that be removed and the natural setting replaced as much as possible with native plantings. The arborist has recommended that we include in our plan street trees to be planted along Parker. Again, what needs to be considered that is we need to be able to see inside the park to make sure it's safe. So the trees that are planted there should be considered with regards to the height, the elevation, and the number so that the park is still a safe place for people to visit. We'd also like to see public art instituted in all our parks, which is what we've tried to do to some degree with the signage we've done at West End, Howard E. Herman, and Big Chimneys. We'd like to see that continued with this park, but also other elements of public art with this park. From this point, we expect that we'll move forward from here with starting a site plan process where, again, more comments will be if we even need to go through a site plan process with the Planning Commission. But we look forward to moving forward. Money's been allocated. Nothing additional is being requested of council at this time. We will just start moving forward. We apologize for the length of time it took us to get us here, but as we all know, it was difficult times for the last 2 years. I'll be glad to answer any questions. If not, I appreciate your time.
All right, well, we appreciate yours. Let's see if we've got any questions from anyone around here. Ms. Connolly?
Thanks for that presentation and for this report. It's really thorough, and I think it was worth 2 years of work to come to this because it's a one-of-a-kind site and really important to get it right. And I do like a lot of the things that you've put in there are exactly what really seems like it belongs there. So thank you for listening to the community and for pulling all that together. Is it going to get a new name? It's called Fellows Property. Was that part of your, I didn't see that as one of the
That is not
recommendations.
part of our process at this point.
Okay.
You know, we have taken the lead at some times, but that wasn't the focus of what we were doing
Okay.
at this time.
Okay, thanks.
Ms. Connolly, or Ms. Hardy?
Thank you. Thank you for joining us, Charlie. It's good to see you. I miss being your liaison, so it's good to see all the work that's happened since then.
Well, we love having both of you come with Carolyn also. We love the additional ideas. So please feel free to continue. And anybody else who wants to attend.
Thank you. So I love, like Mary Beth, I love all the concepts. I think you guys are definitely on the right track with a lot of the concepts you've put in there. I love seeing all the public engagement, and like Mary Beth, I agree that it's been worth the wait. A couple of suggestions. I'm glad you're thinking about multiple entrances because I think accessibility remains really important to me as we think about all of our parks, making sure it's accessible to everybody. And I'm a neighbor, and so I walk the site pretty regularly. So I know that it's pretty accessible right now off Fellows Court and off of South Oak, and I think the entrance off Parker would be interesting, although you'd have to overcome that hill. It also causes challenges with, whether we add a sidewalk there or not, and then what does that do to the width of the street? So I guess considerations would be, does that change the parking kind of configuration there? As I know that that's what a lot of the Oak Street teachers use. Whether we get rid of that kind of berm and add street trees and a sidewalk, what does that do to the site? So just things to think about. But I do think that thinking about accessibility and ADA and creating additional sidewalk would be great things to include as part of the master plan at this stage, given that you have to use the other side of Parker right now to cross Oak Street. So that's one. Second is when you guys mentioned kind of this natural play area, it reminded me of actually Meadowlark Botanical Gardens has an amazing children's garden. And it was really popular with my kids because it had a mud table, it had kind of like this little dome that was made out of sticks. And it was all completely naturally built, and it wasn't very extravagant compared to the rest of Meadowlark, which is very built and is actually gardens. But I encourage you all to look at Meadowlark as maybe inspiration for kind of a natural play area there that would fit, I think, a lot of the vision you're thinking of for Fellows. And then my third question / suggestion is, I understand the desire to kind of take the stormwater facility out in the back, but given that's already there, is there any harm in leaving it and actually putting the urban ag in that back part, since that's where you actually get a lot of sunlight?
From what I understand, the problem you have there is you can't really plant anything with an extensive tree root system because the pipe is there, and that's you're basically taking out the ground that the roots would use to grow. So you could plant basically surface area, surface level plantings and stuff, but to try to get you back to what it was before, and we're not saying we're going there, you're going to need I believe you're going to need the soil in that area as opposed to a concrete
Got
pipe.
it. Well, given that you have a goal of doing some sort of urban agriculture, it's worth thinking about whether that could be that back area,
Sure.
and then not have to spend the money digging up all the storm pipes up again. So, okay. But it was great to see, so thank you for bringing it and updating us.
No problem.
Other comments, questions? Let me ask you on the access. Do you need easements from neighboring property owners to get the various access points you want?
We don't have the survey at this point or the landscape architect, but from what I understand of your property, we'd be coming off of Fellows, we'd be coming off of Parker, both of which are public right-of-ways at this point. As long as you own when you purchase to the curb and gutter, or even more, if under most of the right-of-way, should not be a problem from what I understand. If you don't, if there's a spite strip in there that you don't own when you purchase the property. But I haven't looked at the meets and bounds. I haven't looked at if you got a location survey when you purchased it. But I wouldn't think that would be a problem.
Okay. How about ADA, accessibility and the like in terms of either grade or finished materials on the ground? How does all
Again,
that?
that'll be the landscape architect once we get to that part. As Ms. Hardy talked about, there is a slope on Parker. So how can you bring that, with cutbacks or whatever you can do? That may be a little bit more difficult. It may not be possible. Right now you have the access off of Oak which runs into the driveway of the property, which would be which right now, I believe, is ADA accessible. I don't think it's too hard of a slope. But the pathways that'll go in, we'll put pathways in that are ADA accessible. Materials to be used will be ADA accessible. Looking at access from, excuse me, Fellows Court, from my recollection, that point is pretty level to the street, so I don't think you'd have a problem off of Fellows. So if we get 2 out of 3 access points, we're doing pretty well. If we get 3 access points, we're doing great.
Okay. Anything else? Oh, Mr. Snyder?
Sure, thanks a lot. It's nice to see this take the next step forward. I think we were all very pleased we were able to acquire this site, and so thank you so much for the work that you've put in, as well as the committee. Do we have, at this point, a safe crossing situation between the school and the Fellows property? We have a crosswalk, but is it, I'm assuming we're going to get more traffic across there as this park is developed. We ought to think about making sure that we've got as safe a crossing there as possible.
You know, as similar to Big Chimneys, as Big Chimneys went in and we anticipated more crossing, we were able to upgrade using some of the transportation funds to put that crosswalk in. So, you know, as soon as part of this plan, everybody will be involved and that'll be going. You know, right now, this is the pie in the sky view of what we hope to do with the property when we actually try to put boots on the ground on digging and moving everything around. That'll be, I'm sure, something that's considered from everybody.
Great. Well, thank you very much for moving it forward, you and everyone involved. Thanks.
Well, appreciate it.
All right. Well, unless there's any other questions, I will again offer my thanks, as my colleagues have done, and we greatly appreciate it and look forward to this park opening up to the public formally.
I appreciate it. Take
All
care.
right. Thank you. All right. Let's move on to council requests. Are there any council requests? Okay. Let's move on then to the report of the city manager. I know we've got a VDOT presentation. Mr. Shields, is that going to come before your report? Is that the plan?
I think out of respect of time for our guests, we should have the VDOT report first. And if I could ask Cindy Mester to introduce our guest from VDOT, and then we'll hear from her. And then I do have a few things to report on as well. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Mayor, as you noted, we do have VDOT attending this evening in order to give a presentation for the update on the I-66 projects. And I'm going to invite Ms. Susan Shaw to come up and do the presentation. We have a short slide presentation. And then I think Michelle has now joined, so we have 2 of our VDOT presenters here. And then they'll be glad to entertain any questions. This is an important update given the milestone that the project has now reached and how engaged the City of Falls Church was in the original work for inside and outside 66. Michelle?
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Well, the pressure's off now that the Girl Scouts or the Brownies have left. So I was kind of nervous there. So I'm very glad to be here to give you an update about our Outside the Beltway project, and it does bring some changes to inside the Beltway as well. So we have been working on an express lanes network in the Northern Virginia region. 90-plus miles is what we're working towards that are planned in Northern Virginia. We already have 81 miles that are actually in service now. And then there's an additional 13 miles that are under construction now down in Fredericksburg, extending the 95 express lanes farther south. We're also working on the 495 express lanes north into Maryland, a very short but critical piece of our network. And then we're also studying the south side beltway. That's not included in that 90 miles. It's just currently under study. With all of these systems up and running now, we have 3 different operators in our region. So 95, 395, 495 are transurban operated express lanes. The 66 inside the beltway is a VDOT operated facility. And then outside the beltway is operated by Express Mobility Partners. Okay. So what we've been building since late 2017 is $2.3 billion worth of infrastructure on 22.5 miles that extend from the Capitol Beltway out to Gainesville. The overall project actually provides additional benefits in the corridor that total $3.7 billion. And those include some concession fee projects, $500 million that were being distributed throughout the corridor, both inside and outside, as well as some support for transit service in the corridor, which also it can extend into inside the Beltway as well. We're building 2 express lanes in each direction, alongside 3 general purpose lanes. And then we are leaving space in the middle, or the median of 66, to allow for future transit. That is planned expansion, potentially extension of the Orange Line into Fairfax and Points West. We did also build and already open 2 park and ride lots totaling 3,200 parking spaces. Those are out in Prince William County. And then we have 11 miles of bike trail parallel to 66 and improved pedestrian facilities on all the bridges that cross 66. This is a public-private partnership that will extend through a comprehensive agreement through 2066. So the opening schedule, really, it's open now. This used to be an important slide when it was back in September, but we did open kind of in sections. The western section, September 10th, and then right before Thanksgiving, on Saturday, we opened the remaining westbound portions, and then on Tuesday, before Thanksgiving, we opened the eastbound section. We are in currently HOV2 mode in that entire segment, which will remain until December 5th. I would note that there are still some construction activities that are continuing in the corridor. If you notice at Gallows Road, there's a lot of work at the Gallows Road overpass. It doesn't connect directly to 66. The trail is not open yet. We're still doing some final details around drainage and a few little pieces of sound wall that we're finishing up, and then on some of the approach roadways. And then there is some mainline paving also that we need to finish. The paving that we're doing on 66 requires 50-degree temperatures, which we had at the beginning of November, but we don't have it anymore. So some of that will happen next spring once we get our temperatures back. So how the express lanes work, they're very similar to our other facilities in the region. Variable tolls based on traffic volumes and speed to manage demand and keep the lanes free. There are several tolling segments associated with the express lanes, 3 tolling segments eastbound and 4 tolling segments westbound. That is different than the express lanes on the Beltway. The Beltway just have one big express lanes. You can just get on and off at certain access points. What these tolling segments means is that the tolls that you'll see as you drive end to end are additive. So as you move through each tolling segment, those tolls add up. And that is similar to the 95 express lanes, these longer express lanes where you can't predict what those toll rates might be 20 miles away. You need to be able to give those rates when you're closer to the segment that you're going to be entering. But all of them will have, before you enter a segment, you'll see a toll rate sign, so you can make that choice whether to exit at that next exit point or to continue and get into the general purpose lanes or to stay in the express lanes. In terms of payment, again, very similar to our existing systems, you can pay using your EasyPass transponder. All of that is through our easypassva.com. There's also, you can get those at certain grocery stores and retail in the region. Additional payment options are being offered by I-66 Express Mobility Partners, or EMP. And they have a number of options that you can see on their website, which is ride66express.com. All of their information, you can easily go on our website and have a direct link to theirs, so you don't have to remember that web address. And then some of those alternative payment methods do include administrative fees that are listed on their website. Eligible high occupancy vehicles with 3 or more occupants can ride toll-free, but you need to have the Easy Pass Flex where you flip your transponder to that HOV mode when you meet that HOV condition. Another thing I'll just mention is for the 66 outside the Beltway express lanes, we do allow larger trucks in those lanes, and you'll see those signs as you enter that higher tolls for larger vehicles. There's a number of different classes of vehicles depending on size, and those are all listed, and they pay a multiplier. So sometimes it's 3 times, 5 times, you need to go and look, and whether it's peak hour or not peak hour, those rates can increase. And so those are largely aimed at commercial vehicles. Buses and high occupancy vehicles are not subject to those higher multipliers. In terms of what we're doing for outreach, so 66 Express Mobility Partners has been leading marketing and outreach campaign just focused on their Express Lanes users, getting people to understand how to use the system, where to get on, where to get off. You can also research what your toll rates might be. They have a way to calculate that on the site, so you can plan your trip, look at what your payment options might be. Also look at those vehicle classifications that I was just talking about, and access customer service. They do have a customer service center, a physical building, but it's out in the Ballsford Road Park and Ride Lot exit in Prince William County, off of Ballsford Road. So in terms of the entire corridor and how that's being affected, back in 2016, the Commonwealth Transportation Board made a decision to move the HOV requirement in the entire corridor from HOV 2 to HOV 3. And that includes that new rule goes into effect for the express lanes, but it also is for the HOV lanes, which is still from Route 15 to Gainesville and Prince William County, as well as inside the Beltway. And those 2 segments on either side are only during the peak period, peak hours that HOV rules are in effect, that you would have that HOV 3 requirement. So why, did we move that requirement? One is that we wanted to be consistent across the entire 90-mile express lanes network in the Northern Virginia region. It does follow the regional policy to increase occupancy requirements on all the HOV lanes in the region to HOV 3. Our focus has always been on moving more people, not moving more vehicles, and this helps get to that moving more people. And then it supports the public interest by reducing the number of vehicle miles traveled, reducing travel times, increasing speeds in the express lanes and general purpose lanes, and then complying with the the Federal Clean Air Act. It's also consistent with the National Capital Region's Transportation Planning Board policy to increase the occupancy requirements in the region. And these are just some of the decision points that we've had in the past from the Commonwealth Transportation Board back in 2016. There was the resolution that where we changed the HOV requirements to HOV 3. We did do public meetings during that time period, and then the CTB took their action in July of 2016. And then for inside the Beltway, that goes with the same, it was going to be at the same time. We didn't have an exact date, but it would be consistent with when the rest of the express lanes, the HOV outside the express lanes outside the Beltway began service. So we did, already begin service, but we've set that date certain to be December 5th. That's Monday, December 5th. And so over this coming weekend, the signs will be changed on 66 inside the Beltway at all the entry points from HOV2 to HOV3 in preparation for that Monday commutes. In terms of our own outreach, we are starting our campaign focused on changing the way you move in the corridor. We are promoting new opportunities and incentives to carpool, to vanpool, and to ride commuter bus on the 66 express lanes. We're trying to make sure the public's aware. We've also posted signs in parking lots and at key locations. But our focus for the public message is to make sure that people understand this change that's coming on December 5th. These are just, the next slide just shows some of the tactics that we're using. We have social media, we've done news releases and interviews. We've done a number of elected and official briefings such as this. And then on our website, making sure that there's information there as well. And then we do have a paid media campaign that will include print, radio, and online platforms. We do have some incentives that we're offering, and some additional ways to use the express lanes. Of course, we have new bus service that's being started by Fairfax Connector buses. Those will begin in January, as well as PRTC is starting new bus service as well. And then we also have some incentives for new carpools with cash incentives for anyone starting a new carpool, and that program is available now. And we've been working with our partners, our regional partners, Commuter Connections and Fairfax County Commuter Services to help promote those programs as well. And so with that, I'm going to stop here, and if I have any questions or concerns, I'd be glad to answer.
All right, well, thank you very much. We appreciate the presentation and all the work. We know it's been a long process and very difficult and challenging. Mr. Snyder, do you have any thoughts you might like to share?
Well, Susan, thanks a lot for being here. We've never been, I personally, and I think the city has never been enthusiastic about this change from HOV2 to HOV3. It's going to affect a lot of couples driving into DC, for example. It'll affect people in taxi cabs. It'll affect a large number of people. And inside the Beltway, as you know, there's no choice during those commuter hours. You either pay the freight or you have three. And we're concerned about traffic diversion as a result of this. So in fact, you may not end up with fewer miles driven at all, but you just simply move those miles off 66 onto other streets. So I have to just publicly again express my concerns about moving from HOV2 to HOV3. I think we've said it publicly on a number of occasions. I think that requiring consistency, considering that when you're outside the Beltway, you do have a choice. You have regular lanes that aren't express. When you're inside the Beltway and on 66, you have no choice. So I think there's some significant differences that justify that. So I would continue to make a clear public statement about the lack of support for that particular element. But ending on a more positive note, we appreciate the sound walls. I think the bridge over 29 has been a real positive aspect. Very high quality work there. So my compliments to VDOT for the planning and all the work around there. Now, Mr. City Manager, from time to time, we've had questions about the sound walls. Do we have any remaining citizen issues regarding sound walls? I think most of them were taken care of. I haven't heard of anything lately.
I have not either. We've not had any comments recently about the sound walls or the lack of sound walls, but we can check on our records just to confirm that.
Yeah. Okay, well, those conclude my remarks. There's a lot very positive about this project. We've used some of the toll revenue appropriately for some transportation projects within the city. And so I appreciate that part of it, but have to continue to comment on the movement from HOV2 to HOV3, particularly inside the Beltway. Thank you.
All right. Other comments, Ms. Connolly?
Thanks for your presentation. Can you scroll back, Sophie, to the letting the community know slide? I think it was the second to last. Oh, maybe go forward. Here's the campaign tactics. I'm just wondering, we have Maggie from our communications department here. Are you sharing information for local jurisdictions to put into their communications? Is there any way that they can outreach to you? Because I do feel like on December 5th and 6th and 7th, we're all going to hear about this. So it would be helpful if we would be able to we have a weekly newsletter that comes out on Thursdays. We have a local newspaper, also comes out on Thursdays. It would be great to be able to put some information in those to help continue to alert the community from a local standpoint.
Yeah, no, we would love to do that. So Michelle Holland is here, and she can follow up definitely to make sure that we get.
Maggie's sitting right next to you there, so. Thank you. I think that is really important because I am prepared for lots and lots of people who are surprised by this change, despite the fact that there is an effort to reach them. Sometimes people just don't see things until they're actually getting on the highway.
Right, right. And I think, too, if you're inside, living inside the Beltway, you might not be all that aware of all that's been going on outside. So it might come as news to you.
Right.
Yep.
Yes, so I'm glad that we can be part of promoting that as well. Thanks.
All right, other comments from anyone? Let me ask a question or two. So the express lanes, which I've driven on outside 60 or outside the Beltway, have the, I don't know, I'm drawing a blank on the name for those things, like the little bollards that can be knocked down. Is that the permanent condition for those?
Yes.
Okay, it's a little disconcerting, I think, driving next to those, at least personally, I found it so, as opposed to like a Jersey wall or whatever I would normally
Right.
see.
It's similar to our system, that we've used on the Beltway. There is a 4-foot buffer, so you've got 2 feet either side. But I prefer to be in the left lane when I'm on the express lanes for that reason. But it's a system that we've used. It does make it much easier for snow removal and drainage by having those, and having a barrier, which is there are plenty of systems that have that, requires more width, so it increases our footprint, and so that's why we've gone with that barrier. It helps us minimize the footprint, and when you drive along that corridor, you'll see the importance of minimizing that footprint.
Gotcha. How about landscaping? Is there any landscaping to soften some of those walls and the like?
There is landscaping, and that's one of the activities that we anticipate this spring. Now, I will say there's a lot of places where, the walls are next to the trail or next to the road. So, we had a very, very tight corridor with a lot of retaining walls to minimize that impact, but we will be looking for spaces to landscape this spring.
I mean, there are green walls you can do that really have very little requirements as far as depth, which I think would really soften visually and also for the environment.
Yeah.
I would suggest maybe you consider.
Okay.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else, any other questions I had. I think that's it, unless anyone else has anything else. Thank you so much for your work, and appreciate you coming by this evening.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Shields.
I've just got a couple of additional things to alert the council and the city and the community to, and I'll start with the Little City gift card. I know this has been well publicized, but just want to plug that again, that the public can now buy a Little City gift card and use it at over 60 businesses in the city of Falls Church. And there is a bonus that comes with it, where if you buy a card for $30, you can get a $15 bonus, and up through a $100 card with a $50 bonus. And so it's a great deal for consumers, but it's also a great way to encourage people to shop local and support our Falls Church city businesses during this holiday season. A couple other things to note. Our planning staff are working on 2 zoning code ordinances that the public has an interest in. One is our outdoor dining ordinance, Our restaurants have been operating under the emergency provisions from the COVID pandemic for a long time now, and so we are working with the community to develop some proposals for permanent changes to our zoning to facilitate outdoor dining and using parking spaces for that purpose, while also making sure that we're complying with the Americans with Disabilities Act, with fire safety, and other key public safety provisions. So we plan to come to council in January with a discussion of some options for regulating our restaurants under new relaxed rules, basically deploying all the lessons we've learned from some of the positive aspects of outdoor entertainment and dining for our restaurants in the city. In addition, planning staff are also working with the Planning Commission right now on proposed changes to our transitional zoning regulations. And the Planning Commission will have a work session on this on December 7th, and they will have their final public hearing on their recommendations to the City Council at their last meeting of the year on December 21st. We had a listening session on November 2nd. It was very well attended. The Planning Commission has gotten a lot of comment on these proposed changes, and so we want to thank the public for all of their involvement and commentary on this issue, which the Planning Commission will work through and then provide a set of recommendations that will come to the City Council in one of your meetings in January. I want to note on the conversion to LED lighting for our residential areas. We've already made the conversion to LED lighting for most of our commercial districts. But in our residential areas, we wanted to put some lights up. We put up 21 fixtures in residential areas with a variety of different styles based on the styles that are on the street right now, but with a LED version of those same styles, and invite the public to comment on them. The survey was closed out in September, and we received 40 written responses to our request for just comment on the brightness, on the color of the fixtures. Generally, the comments that we did get was concerns about their brightness. There's also commentary on generally trying to be towards the warmer or softer end of the spectrum for our lighting. So as a general takeaway from the survey, we will be going with the lowest wattage that Dominion Power offers for their LED light fixtures at 70 watts, generally in our residential areas, and we'll also be going with the lowest Kelvin setting that they offer as well in response to the comments that we got from the fixtures that were put up during our pilot. The reasons for moving ahead, of course, we have a 75% energy reduction with the conversion to LED, and we are right now able to take advantage of a discounted installation price because Dominion is installing these throughout the Northern Virginia region. They are also, whenever a sodium vapor light goes out, they're always replacing it now with an LED. And so we are looking to move ahead with that conversion using, again, the lowest wattage levels that the Dominion Energy provides and the lowest Kelvin temperatures. Just two other quick things to note. The Howard Herman Trail is being refurbished, and so that trail is closed this week. We're putting a new stone mix in that will hopefully help prevent some of the erosion that we've been experiencing on that trail. The Cavalier Trail, Crossman Park Trail, and Berman Park Trails all remain open. So this is just the Howard Herman Trail that will be refurbishing with this new stone mix. And then the last thing to note for the public, we have been experiencing phone outages here at City Hall. For customers of Verizon and T-Mobile, there's an issue with those vendors in terms of their exchanges, and so calls are not able to come into City Hall from those providers. AT&T customers are able to connect with City Hall normally. We're working with those companies to try to get this resolved quickly, but we do have information up on the webpage. This does not impact 911 calls. but we will hopefully get this resolved as quickly as possible. That's all I have to report tonight. Be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Any questions or comments for Mr. Shields? Ms. Conley?
I just want to note the wonderful tree lighting ceremony that we had before this meeting, and thank Ms. Hardy and Becky Witzman and Renee and Jim Snyder from the Economic Development Office on pulling that off. It was really nice, well attended. I think there were 500 people there, lots of music and good cheer and lights, and it was fun. So thank you.
All right. Other comments, Ms. Hardy?
Thank you for that. Mr. Shields, going back to the LED conversion, you mentioned lowest Kelvin and the lowest wattage. Was there an example of what that looked like on one of those streets? Because I was actually one of your probably 40 comments. I walked all of those sites with my dog, and there are definitely some that I thought were appropriate, and I think I submitted a comment for the one that I thought was most fitting. I was just curious whether there's still an example out that people can reference and know that that's how their residential light's going to look.
That's a very good point. I don't have that right at the tip of my fingers, but I will see if I can get the address of where kind of those lower settings were out on the street.
Great. Thank you.
Along those same lines, do the lights we're going to get have like the ability to dim them down at certain hours and the like?
We will not have that capability, and so that capability is currently not offered by Dominion Power. We did go down to Virginia Tech as part of the Smart Cities program, and we learned all about how that technology is coming along. And I think eventually we will be able to get there, but it is not an option that's available from Dominion at the present time.
And the lights that we're getting, can we change the bulbs later, or the fixture itself is sort of integral with the bulb?
I don't know the answer to that question. Cindy's standing up. Maybe she does.
Yeah, these lights will be able to be retrofitted to the dimming capability in the future, either through Dominion or as we work on like the innovation with Smart City.
How about the actual, like either Kelvin, the temperature, or the wattage? Are those also capable of put a new bulb in and you're done, or is it that you have to replace the fixture and the bulb?
For the majority of them, it would be the bulb could be replaced.
Okay.
And Mr. Shields did mention that Dominion's doing the change now with anything that breaks, and that's why we also want to be pretty proactive, because we're getting whatever they choose to put in and not necessarily what we want in terms of the Kelvin and the color light tone.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Unless there's anything else for the city manager, I want to move on to business on the agenda.
And Mayor, could I just jump in with one last thing? It was a great holiday event we had tonight, and if I could just add to the thanks to that, our DPW crew, Herb Holmes and Zach Bradley and Tara Pouzin worked really hard with our contractor to get those lights installed. With the move to the west, there were some issues to debug, and so it did require some attention. I just wanted to thank them as well.
All right. Great. Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Yes, our first item is a second reading and public hearing on TO 22-21, ordinance to amend Chapter 26, Motor Vehicles and Traffic, Article 1 of the Code of the City of Falls Church to provide authority to the city manager to reduce the speed limit on certain local city streets to 20 miles per hour.
Mr. Shields, are you handling this?
I will, and I'll just give a brief summary of what's before City Council. This ordinance is before City Council for second reading and final consideration, along with a public hearing tonight, and we have received written comment on this proposed ordinance. The first thing to note, what the ordinance does is lay out in city ordinance the authority to lower the speed limit to 20 miles per hour on local streets. And so what is intended with this is that Route 7 and Route 29 would currently be unchanged. They would stay at the current posted speed limits. Our larger collector streets, such as West Street, Lincoln, Hillwood, Great Falls, and Park Avenue would also remain at the current 25 mile per hour zone. Our smaller residential streets is what is intended for this ordinance to address. Those streets have design configurations that support a 20 mile per hour speed limit, and the safety benefits to the public, to pedestrians, to cyclists are very dramatic and extensive with lowering the speed limit to 20 miles per hour. So the staff recommendation is in favor of this ordinance. If the council does move forward with this ordinance on second reading tonight, we would have an extensive public notification campaign and public education campaign to let people know which streets will be lowered to 20 miles per hour. We would then order the signs. We would have a contractor install the signs as well. So if this is adopted tonight, we would be looking for a springtime implementation of lower speed limits on this on the smaller local residential streets in the city. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Shields. Questions, comments? Mr. Snyder?
Sure, thanks a lot. I support the movement from 25 to 20 in as many streets as possible because of the data on what happens to pedestrians when they're hit at higher speeds, and bicyclists and others. And considering the speeding and distracted driving that plagues not only the city but the region and the country, this is something we can do. Now, we're not just simply passing this ordinance. You mentioned public information. How about enforcement? I know there's a lot of concern about traffic enforcement. This is not in place of enforcement and would be with enforcement, as I understand it. And that's a yes, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. So explain to me why we're not doing it on connector streets in particular, as well as 29 and Route 7.
So the basic reason is that the streets are designed in such a way that the driver and the users of those streets kind of read them as being 25 mile per hour appropriate. And so the concern is that if you mark them at 20 miles per hour and you enforce it, that won't necessarily change behavior, whereas we think we can change behavior and sustain that change in behavior on the smaller local residential streets. In the future, as we move forward with traffic calming and other safety improvements on some of those collector streets, then 20 miles per hour may be appropriate. So Park Avenue is an example of where we're actually intending to lower Park Avenue to 20 miles per hour after the Park Avenue Great Streets project is completed. Lincoln Avenue is another example where with the greening of Lincoln project, we are intending to work with the community on traffic calming measures there. We're really just starting that process now. But at the end of that process, it may be appropriate to lower speeds on Lincoln to 20 miles per hour as well. Those are just two examples.
Okay, so, yeah, I mean, my preference would be to be broader with this, but we got to start somewhere, and this is a whole lot better than not moving forward on this at all. I would also note that the state gives us very limited things we can do about highway safety. Electronic enforcement is limited. The red light running cameras are limited, and areas and other highway safety measures. So it seems to me we ought to use the authority we have, and this would be part of that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Other comments? Mr. Duncan?
Thank you. A question and a thought. Where did we land on the speed limit on South Washington Street being at odds with the speed limit everywhere else?
So because that is part of the National Highway System, we have to run those issues through VDOT. We did have VDOT here tonight. We should have asked the question. She probably wouldn't have had the answer. But we do have that question in process with VDOT, and so we'll have more information on that on that soon. I think the point is well taken, and I think the staff position would be to have consistency along the Route 29 corridor at 25 miles per hour.
So is it possible that since this is going to take until springtime to roll out, that we might be able to coordinate that inquiry with VDOT and the new signs that we'll put up sometime in the late winter, early spring?
That's our goal.
Okay, I think that's a excuse me, a very worthy goal. Anybody else have any other questions? I just had a thought. yeah, I think it's going to be a unanimous vote for all the reasons that have been articulated earlier. But I did want to let the folks know who have written this. There's been a fair amount of pretty passionate sharing of views on this issue, including the letter that the clerk read from Mr. Polinsky, who lives around the corner from me. And one point that he made is a good point, which is, we have essentially built our economic development prospects around the notion that we are going to capture business from traffic that is moving through the city. And we do not want to develop a reputation as somehow opposed to folks driving through Falls Church, or create an impression that we're somehow anti-car, because we're not. We want people who live outside our boundaries to come patronize our groceries and our movie theaters and all the other amenities that we've added in the last several years. So the 7-0 vote on this issue, I hope, will not fall on the ears of those who oppose it as we were just ignored. I'm going to vote for this staff report because I think it is a fair balancing of the situation on the main corridor streets as opposed to the residential corridors. So anybody who's driven around town knows that, on most of our smaller residential streets, 20 feels about right. And on some streets, 20 maybe even feels a little fast, like on West Marshall, where you've got traffic parked on both sides. And so I think this will mesh with reality. But for us to reach the promised land of lower speed limits on some of our major corridors, we have a whole lot of work left ahead. We have, architectural changes on the street, traffic calming measures, changes in behavior, frankly. I mean, just tonight, I'm leaving the house, turning right on from West Street onto Broad, and there's pedestrians coming across from Founders Row with the signal, and I know to stop and let pedestrians cross, but the lighting there, even though it's, the newest stuff we've got, is not really very good to shone enough light on those pedestrians that they can easily be seen. And I think, to make Broad and Washington safely crossable at multiple intersections is going to be the work of many years, and it's going to require probably more lighting and maybe, if not a ban on turns on red, at least some sort of advance signaling for pedestrians to give them time to cross the street. So I just want to acknowledge those who have written with concerns about the speed limit change, that we are starting a process that's going to take many years and is going to require a change in culture, including, another tonight, as I'm coming to the meeting, somebody's crossing the crosswalk on West Street there at Ellison, and there's no light there at all. That's going to improve when we do Founders Row too. But, the fellow is wearing dark clothes, walking in the dark, marching across the street, and we just can't have that. We have to educate pedestrians and cyclists and others who are in vulnerable positions that they need to be more visible, and we'll do all we can to try to make conditions safer for them, but they have to take some responsibility themselves. So anyway, all those things are rolling around in my mind as I cast this vote, and I just want to thank those who've written on both sides of this issue, because I know the passions are very strong, and I think there's fundamental agreement. It's just going to take us a while to get there. Thanks.
All right, Ms. Hardy.
Thank you. Like Mr. Schneider and Mr. Duncan, I do plan on supporting this. I do think, though, as I spoke at the first time we voted on this, I would like to see us commit to a more elegant solution. So instead of 3 tiers, get to 2, Route 7 and Route 29. I think if it takes a longer VDOT process to get down to 25 miles an hour instead of 20, that's fine. But I do think it is simpler and less signs and better for enforcement if we can get those collector streets. And so as we talk about, and I understand the operational complexities with getting there, but as we talk about the public education, I want to make sure 3 points are very clear, because this is a really good opportunity to talk about a lot of things we've all set up here. Is one, in reading the public comments, some of the comments have said that we're making streets less functional, we are unfriendly to cars. A different way of thinking about it, in my mind, is that we are actually prioritizing people, and we are talking explicitly about making it a people-first place. And that doesn't mean prioritizing cars. That means we are also trying to elevate the roles of pedestrians and cyclists. And so I think that's a really good opportunity to talk about reframing that discussion, is how to think about prioritizing people and what that kind of place feels like, and how that actually can be supportive for economic development reasons. We're not trying to push cars away, but how to welcome people that may come in other forms of transportation. So that's the first point. I think that's a policy point that we've been very clear about at the city council level, and I think that's been evident in the investments we've made in our work plan and our budget. The second point is that we do intend to get those collector streets to 20 miles an hour, and we could talk about the Lincoln project, the Park Avenue project as things coming up where we expect the traffic calming and the re-engineering to get those streets 20 miles an hour. I think it's really important to set the community's expectations that those are things to come. And then the third point is that 20 miles an hour is not the only tool. It's only one of many things that we are doing. So again, equally important for us to keep up our commitment around sidewalks, the NTC program, enforcement, the deterrent solutions we talked about, like the red light camera and the speed camera work. It's again good just to bring community awareness that those are things that we are also investing in, and this is not just a one quick, easy way of doing it to really promote safety and pedestrian safety and cyclist safety. So I think with all the public education that we're going to invest in this, it's probably good just to make sure those 3 points are hit on so that people understand that in the bigger context why this makes sense and why there's probably pretty universal support up here for it. So, but thank you.
All right, Ms. Connolly.
Thanks, Mayor Charter. I would agree with Letty on those 3 points as well. We need to make sure that people understand the full scope of what it is that we're trying to do. And your point that we're trying to make streets be for people. Cars actually have people in them, and we want them to be safe too. So there's that. And people who drive cars also walk and ride bikes. And we need to keep that in mind as well, that it really is a whole solution here. A couple questions I have on some of the streets that are the border streets. One of them is Walden Court, that is shown as a border street. It's a little tiny cul-de-sac there. On the right, I'm wondering why that can't just be a 20-mile-an-hour street. It's right within the city off of Lincoln. You couldn't even really go 25 miles an hour on Walden Court. It's so small.
Okay.
And then because this is a plan that will take several years, I'm assuming the border streets will also be step 3, step 4, step 5, working with our neighbors to try to reduce the speed on those as well. And I think that's an important part of the message. And I asked this earlier, and I confess I can't remember the answer, but because we're going to be maybe the first jurisdiction in the area to reduce our speed limits to 20, is there a way to make those signs special that say, "Welcome to Falls Church, please drive gently, 20 miles per hour," or something along, or do they just have to be standard VDOT 20 miles per hour on the sign?
So we took your question to be kind of like a gateway sign, welcome to Falls Church, and then, provide some additional information. So we're trying to think that through a little bit more. In terms of the actual on the streets themselves, there is a standard, and we have to follow that basic standard. But I think, your idea about some general messaging in our gateways is something that I think we'll need to do a little bit more work on.
And I think you can also put a sign under the sign. So if we have those metal poles, you have the 20-mile-per-hour sign, and then underneath of it there could be a smaller sign that indicates how special we are at 20 miles an hour, just to get people to catch that.
I will note that it is something that many, I don't think they've done it yet, but many of our surrounding jurisdictions are considering similar ordinances. And so this is something that I think the traveling public is going to get more used to, and the hope here is to change behaviors. That's what we're trying to do. and have people drive through a residential streets in a manner that's appropriate for that residential street, which is to say slow and carefully.
All right. I have a comment or two. I'll support this motion tonight. I do agree, though, with the city manager about the collector streets. Ultimately, to me, the solution lies not with a speed limit per se, but actually with design of the road. When you have very wide travel lanes, people are just naturally going to speed. Unless you have a police officer there all the time, you're going to have a heck of a time reducing speeds. I think you need to have bump outs or whatever it is, just physical infrastructure in place to slow people down, unless you're going to have police there every day. And we tend not to have our police on the side streets, or at least in my experience, they tend to focus on the major corridors like Route 7. And so I think the kind of things that we're talking about, or that I'm thinking about, are crosswalks and bump outs, throttling down the width of the roadways, the street travel lanes are what's going to really cause people to slow down. And so I think it's a collective solution, but not just speed limits, but also all these other things, which we've talked about at length. But I do think that's an important component as well, and it's kind of not a one solution will solve everything. Lastly, I'm going to ask for any public comment. Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Do we have a motion that anyone would like to make?
Mr. Mayor, I'd move to adopt TO 22-21.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Hiscott on the second. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Let's move to the next item.
Yes, we have a public hearing and second reading on TO 22-18, ordinance to amend ordinance 2024 and 2045 regarding the budget of expenditures and revenues, appropriating funds for fiscal year 2023 for the general fund, school operating fund, and the capital improvement program funds.
Good evening, Mayor Tarter and members of council. We have before you the second reading of the first budget amendment in fiscal year 2023, which is requesting a portion of last fiscal year's year-end funds, general fund, ARPA funds, portion of permit reserves, and like to fund key strategic initiatives that is consistent with the City Council's work plan. There are no changes that are proposed in this budget amendment since the first reading on November 14th. And I'd like to call your attention to the one-page matrix that provides a summary of the funding request, along with the sources of all the funds. That's a table that's provided on page 2 of the staff report. And in a nutshell, this budget amendment, City will not be issuing any debt. And this will be the second year. We haven't issued any debt since November 2020. Secondly, we would have committed most of the ARPA funds with this, allowing to set aside a portion to fulfill our ongoing costs through December 2025. That's allowed in compliance with the ARPA funding. And also, this budget amendment honors the revenue share practice with the schools. And finally, this budget amendment sets aside funds in general fund, permit reserves that can be used to address fiscal year 2024 budget challenges and needs, unmet needs at that time. And I'll stop here and see if there are any questions.
All right. I think you're good to go. Oh, you have a question, Ms. Conley?
Just a question regarding the request for an arborist that we heard earlier. Is that in the budget, or is that a new request?
It is a new request, and it is not in the budget. And so in discussions, what Ms. Bawa and I are thinking is that this would be a conversation we would have for the FY24 budget, and it would be in the context of kind of all the things that DPW needs for the next year, and the arborist has raised this as an issue. And so we'll certainly seek to fund it, but we'll have to weigh it with a whole host of competing needs. And so that's kind of where our thinking is on it at the present time.
Is there any money for the arborist in this amendment?
Not in this budget amendment.
Not in this budget amendment.
But their division within
Right.
DPW has funding set aside, and when they prepare their department budgets, they do provide a list of unmet needs that are prioritized at a department level,
Okay.
and then we look at it holistically at a
Okay,
citywide
I just
level.
thought this wasn't the first time we heard about the tree inventory, and I just wasn't sure if it had ever made it into a budget.
It was part of the unfunded.
It was unfunded last year,
list.
and it will remain unfunded for here, but then we will consider it for next year's
Correct.
budget. Okay.
All right, please, did you have questions? All right.
Thank you. So Mary Beth covered my tree inventory question, and I think we had raised the City Hall bike shelter, which sounds like it's being considered using with local funds, so we don't need to include it in the budget amendment.
That's correct.
Thank you. And then several of us have raised the Beato's commercial sidewalk accessibility. Is that also something we think we can cover with local funds once we get the easements?
We do, and so what the council has appropriated money for missing link sidewalks, and so we would think that this qualifies. And so when we come to you in December with our list of what actually I think we're scheduled to do that in January, a list of sidewalk projects, this would be one of those listed.
Great. And I know we were also interested in expanding the red light camera and speed cameras, and I know that there was probably going to be a broader recommendation. So this probably should have been part of my council request, but I would love to get that broader report of what our vendor found and what the recommendations are.
And so that is in process, and so we're going to get that to council I think, very soon. We don't think it needs a budget amendment for this fiscal year. There may need to be a budget. There may be a budget impact for FY24, but we don't think there will be one for the current year, even if we move full steam ahead.
Okay. Great. Thank you. That's it.
Proceed.
I'm done.
Oh, you're done. Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
A couple more. The timing of those employee bonuses that for 275, when would that hit, Mr. Shields?
So if this is approved by the City Council tonight, then our intention would be to have that be in the December 9th pay period.
Got it. The vehicle replacement of 200,000, I think I saw that right, or 150. Which vehicle are we replacing again?
It's really for citywide needs. So we do have a list of fleet requests across the city. We would prioritize that. DPW has a list. The police have a list. The other thing that we're moving towards, you'll see in the back lot, we do have, all those white vehicles back there. We are moving towards a more centralized program so that all of our non-police users are sharing a pool. That's a transition. People have to change some of their ways of thinking about that, but that's the direction we're trying to go in. One, to get a better, to have better vehicles, but fewer of them is the goal. And when I say better, more efficient, electric vehicles whenever possible, and equipment that's really going to serve the staff's needs to the best extent possible.
You were going where I was going with that, because so it's not so much an increasing the footprint of the current fleet, it's a rationalizing of.
That's right.
Right, okay.
And shrinking the footprint and using it more effectively.
Focusing on quality, okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Snyder?
Yeah, so, Ms. Bawa, could you explain to us the use of the reserve funds and what we're doing with regard to increasing those reserve funds with this proposal? I know you mentioned it as one of the 4 things that it does. I wondered if you could go into a little more detail.
Sorry, sure. We are proposing setting aside $900,000 in general fund that could be tapped into during the 2024 budget amendment, budget development. And some of the needs that we are aware of, the cost drivers that we may need the funding for, include The usual compensation 1% increase is about $230,000. 10% health insurance increase in premiums is about $240,000. Any outcomes of the compensation study that may require any more than the funding that has been set aside, which is $200,000 annually, that would be also eligible for use of these funds. Additionally, Council, with this budget amendment, added a rapid response crew team for 3 members in DPW, and that is an ongoing cost, which would require $260,000. So contracts, if we were to estimate a 5% increase in interjurisdictional contracts and other contracts, utilities here, we're talking somewhere between over 500,000 total internal and external contracts. WMATA 3% increase is 150,000, but we are aware that they're facing a fiscal cliff and which has not been addressed yet. So there are a lot of key things that'll play out along with the outcome of the grocery tax, which the number for us is 1.9 million in fiscal 2024.
So I asked for challenges, and I got even a longer list than I was expecting. So I think putting aside significant amounts of money from any surplus we have this year is a prudent thing to do. And I hope as we go on, if we get some additional numbers, that we'll continue to add to that. It appears that we will need it. 2 other questions. With regard to the arborist request, I think, and I recall that the Village Preservation and Improvement Society did a great program a couple of weeks ago on trees, and I think we ought to take a look at what we can do to up our game in that area, and this may be a part of it. So hopefully we can do a little bit of planning for next budget year. And I wish we had the money to put aside this year, and it seems evident that we don't right now, at least not in the proposal. So hopefully we can keep that as a high priority request. The second request that came in over the course of this was from the Falls Church News Press, and I'd like to see Office of Communications and the city manager and the city attorney take a look at what might be appropriate, what would go into a contract that would provide benefit commensurate with the amount of money that would be in such an agreement, just for future use and consideration. Thank you.
All right, any other comments? Any member of the public wish to speak to this matter? See none, the matter is closed to the public. Do we have a motion?
Motion to adopt TO 22-18.
Second.
Second with Ms. Conley. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yeah.
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shon-Siscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Council.
And I would just ask maybe the city attorney, Ms. Conley and I have typically read disclosures or statements about, my wife works at the Fairfax, or the Falls Church School Board. Do we need to do anything at this point? I know we've just taken the vote.
Yeah, my position is if you read it before first reading, I think that's enough. It carries through till approval, but I haven't really examined your process up till now.
Okay.
But I'm satisfied that you've complied with the requirements.
Okay, good. Where were we did we complete the vote? I can't remember.
We did, and the motion carried.
It's been 3 minutes and I've already forgotten, so.
Glad I'm not the only one.
I did ask for public comment, unless I've also, my memory's also, maybe your memory's exactly. I'll never forget old what's-his-face. All right, let's move on to the next item then, Madam Clerk.
Sure. Public hearing and second reading on TO 22-19, ordinance to amend Chapter 30 Personnel, Article 4 Pension Plans of the Code of the City of Falls Church to expand the duties of the city's retirement board to include investment oversight of defined contributions retirement savings plans.
All right, Ms. Mester. Ms. Mester, are you handling this matter?
Be glad to, Mayor, and I do want to acknowledge that the Retirement Board Chair, Connie Reinberg, is joining us virtually on Teams, so she's available for any questions or comments you may ask of the Chair.
All right.
And I don't have a big presentation tonight because there has
Perfect.
been no change since first reading. So we did present the reasons and the rationale and the Retirement Board's vote in support for this action so that we have good fiduciary oversight over this defined contribution benefit for our employees. And so with that, Mayor, I'm glad to entertain any questions. And as I mentioned, the chair is available as well. And we would request to move to adopt this evening.
All right, well, thank you very much. Ms. Ryberg, do you have anything that you wanted to add?
Sure, I'll just, on behalf of the Retirement Board, I'll reiterate our support and confirm our support for this change and confirm our commitment to take on this role with the same care and due diligence that we take with the retirement programs that we currently oversee.
All right, well, thank you for that affirmation and for the fine work you've done in the past and the board has done in the past. I think we have a great deal of confidence in your all's professional skills and recommendations. Are there any questions that anyone has? Any comments? Any member of the public wish to speak to this matter? Seeing none, the matter is closed to public comment. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt TO 22-19.
Second.
Ms. Leon in the second. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Let's keep going. Would you call the next item, please?
Well, let's see. We have TR 22-42, resolution requesting that the General Assembly amend Section 4.14, appointments of the Charter of the City of Falls Church to require that appointed members to city boards and commissions be at least 18 years of age and residents of the city, and removing the requirement that they be qualified voters of the city.
All right. Is anyone doing a staff report? Ms. Messner, briefly?
Sure, Mayor. As you will recall, Council did adopt a similar resolution last year that went to the General Assembly, and the legislation failed through veto by the governor. In working with the Council's Legislative Committee and general consensus from Council, the committee did request that we put forth this resolution for council consideration this evening and then just submit to the General Assembly for legislation again. Working with our interim city attorney and looking at state code, we needed to readopt the resolution and rehold a public hearing because the General Assembly failed to act last session. So that's why it's before you. It is before you in identical form as presented last year and submitted to the General Assembly based on the recommendation of the Legislative Committee that we stick to the principles and the intent from Council from last year, and hope that we may prevail in the General Assembly, or if there's amendments, I will then come back and talk to the Legislative Committee if they'd be acceptable in working with our senator and delegate. Due to the timing of this evening's authorization for the public hearing and then scheduling the public hearing and adoption for December 12th. I have submitted this legislation is before you this evening to Senator Sasslaw and Delegate Simon so they could draft a bill pending the formal vote on the 12th, because it always could be withdrawn, but their deadline is December 1st. So as we did last year, I've coordinated in advance with them, and they are in support of sponsoring the legislation. So with that, I'm glad to answer any questions, but we do ask Council to authorize a public hearing and advertise that and adopt on this December 12th meeting, your last one of the year.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments, Mr. Snyder?
Just have one comment about this. I support this approach. I think we're going to have to be very careful in the environment in Richmond, how we pursue it. But I support it because it basically expands the expertise and experience that we can bring to bear on important city matters through our boards and commissions. So I support moving forward at I support moving forward, and I support this resolution. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Hardy?
Just a quick comment. So thanks for the legislative committee for moving this forward again. I think our intent remains the same, and so I don't see the need to water it down, so I'm glad to see this come forward again. I guess the question is really, do we have a different strategy on how to get this potentially passed in Richmond?
I have put that specific request out to Senator Sasslaw and Delegate Simon and haven't heard back. I don't know that they have at this point any different strategy based on what we tried last year, but they're kind of assessing what the bills are and kind of the sense of the two houses, and we'll see. I think they concurred with sending it in as you all intended last year, and then depending on comments, as you recall, the senator did put forth some amendments and they couldn't get out of both chambers, and so it went back to the governor as originally submitted and then vetoed. So we'll work on a strategy. I'm not sure that they have a different one yet until session's in order and maybe they get some different reactions.
Put us to work on BML Day 2. Thank you.
We can do our formal and big and robust outreach again and see how the votes prevail.
All right. Unless there's any other comment, is there any public comment? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move approval. I'm sorry. Vice Mayor Hardy, did you want to move it? Or?
Go ahead.
No? Okay.
Pledge.
I move approval of TR 22-42.
Second.
All right.
Do we have to do the motion that's on the screen?
Yes, if we could have a motion to conduct the public hearing and advertise, please.
Dave?
Isn't it a resolution?
It is a resolution, but under the state code and our city charter, it requires a public hearing. And so we need to go through a similar process as an ordinance, even though it's a resolution. Is that correct, Mr. Attorney?
Yes, it is. So the proposed motion is written on the item.
Right. So I move to authorize a public hearing for TR 22-42 on December 12, 2022, and advertise the same according to law.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Who's the second?
Second.
Ms. Leon? Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shunts-Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yeah.
Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item?
We have TO 22-43. Resolution adopting the City of Falls Church 2023 legislative program.
Ms. Messner?
Thank you, Council. So the legislative program that's before you is the one that was discussed by the Legislative Committee on October 28th and is in large part very similar to the one adopted for 2022. It does still continue to use the vision, the values, the equity lens, environmental lens, for example, and many of the same positions remain the same because they're still consistent needs. I do want to note that the Environmental Sustainability Council, the Mary Riley Stiles Public Library Board of Trustees, and the Electoral Board submitted formal comments, and those are included in your resolution and documentation before you. And I do recommend including those in their entirety by reference, along with the ones from VML and our Northern Virginia transportation entities, NVTA and NVTC. On the VML front, it was sort of with pleasure. I went back through the committee membership, and every single committee of VML had a City of Falls Church representative, so I think our voice was well heard, and those positions, while statewide, are still very relevant for the City of Falls Church. The city charter is referenced in the legislative program, and that will cross reference to the resolution that you just moved forward for public hearing. And the only other thing that I would like to note is there is one new position in the legislative program that's been being referred to as swatting, and that is because of 911 calls to deploy the SWAT team. And so law enforcement's referring to it as swatting. And this is a legislative initiative from Arlington that we've included in this legislative program based on some more support from your committee. It also has the support of the City of Falls Church Police Chief and Sheriff. And this would make it illegal and have more penalties for folks that call as a hoax to 911 to deploy teams out to a non-emergent situation that therefore depletes resources for other critical needs, either just because they want them off somewhere else or as a way to deploy and then have another criminal activity occurring elsewhere. So that's the one new language. The actual bill hasn't been filed yet, but Arlington County is working with their delegation to work on the state code language, but conceptually bringing that forward for support from City Council. With that, Mayor and Council, glad to answer any questions or receive additional input.
All right, thank you. Do our legislative committee folks have anything they'd like to mention?
Just as chair, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to thank the hard work of Councilmember Sean Hitchcock and Phil Duncan for their work, and City Mester especially for the awesome job of putting all this together. And I think it's a very good program. Thanks to everyone involved and the input of other city council members as well along the way, and the public, and especially our boards and commissions. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Other comments or questions from anyone? Ms. Conley?
Just a follow-on to your comment about swatting, and that is the additional danger is the actual place where the hoax call is, the trauma caused to people when they see police coming in, guns drawn, and they don't know what's going on. So I think I'm sure that's included in there somewhere, but I think I'm glad that that's included. Thank you.
That's a very valid point, because one of the biggest ones in our region has been to schools, where they simultaneously called out to schools. So you had the trauma of the teachers and the students
Right.
and the deployment.
Right, and then the possible danger to people when all that occurs as a hoax.
All right, any other comments or questions? If not, any public comment? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Do we have a motion?
Move to adopt TR 22-43.
Second?
Second.
Mr. Duncan on the second. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mayor Charter?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, please.
We have TR 22-46, resolution establishing the 2023 city government holiday schedule.
Mr. Mason, are you on the line?
Good evening, Mayor Tarter, members of City Council. I am.
All right. Well, thank you. Sorry to keep you here so long. We probably should try to find a way to get this matter a little bit earlier on, but thanks for sticking around. Do you have anything you'd like to say about this?
No, it's pretty standard, other than to say that in the Washington, D.C. area, we offer our employees 13 days of holidays per year, and the average in the area is about 12 and a half. So we are extremely competitive, if not at the top of the group.
All right. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Mason? Ms. Connolly? I'm sorry, Ms. Hardy?
Oh, thanks, Mr. Mason. I think Election Day is a new state holiday. Is that one that we chose not to adopt?
That's correct. We did choose not to adopt that day.
Okay. Is that something that we think will have concerns from our employees?
It has not in the recent.
Okay. Well, let's keep an eye on it for future years.
All right. Did you have a comment also? Ms.
I did. Oh, I just want to confirm, and I'm sorry, I don't have the staff report in front of me, that the EAC had a look at this and employees agreed that these were the right holidays.
Yes, this was sent to all employees prior to it coming to City Council.
Great, thanks.
All right. Anything else from anyone? Any public comment? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Do we have a motion?
I move to adopt TR 22-46.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Was that Ms. Hardy on the second?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. And we are on to consent items.
Okay, does anyone want to remove anything from the consent agenda? These are just, looks like it's just appointments. Anything beyond appointments? Just
I would note that we do have an item after consent, which is the request for council to approve a job order contract with HIT Contracting LLC, so that'll be after consent. We pulled it off consent because there had been questions about it, and so I just wanted to note that.
All right, so at present, the consent agenda is just the appointments?
That's correct.
Okay. Anything that anyone wants to remove? Okay, do we have a motion?
Mayor, I move the consent agenda.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Connolly on the second. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
All right, other business, Mr. Shields?
The one item we have for other business is to authorize the city's purchasing agent on behalf of the city to award a job order contract under an existing agreement with HIT Incorporated for job contracting services up to $500,000 for each job order. We do have Mr. Bradley, who's on the call. Mr. Bradley, our Public Works Director, would you like to handle this item? Or did you want me to
Yes.
summarize it?
No, I can take it, Mr. Shields.
Super, thank you.
All right. Good evening, Mayor Tarter and council members. Just as a brief overview, this contract is a writable contract through Fairfax County and would allow us to kind of fill in the gap, so to speak, of what our current HVAC vendors can do for the community center. So this is not asking for additional money for the community center HVAC or anything like that. This is simply kind of in line with the rest of our JOC contracts and several of our other on-call contracts that would allow us to award a contract for no more than $500,000 to HIT Construction. That's about what we expect the cost to be to kind of fill in those gaps of what our HVAC vendors cannot do. HIT will also be able to provide kind of construction management services for us as well. Let's see. In terms of background, we are working with HIT and our HVAC vendors to kind of determine cost and scope for the community center. We're looking at several different options right now. Kind of the extreme ends of what we're looking at is replacing everything in kind to replacing everything with electric heat and cooling in its entirety. So we'll come back to you with more information on that in the future as those kind of materialize. We start to get some better understanding of what those impacts are, what those total costs are. This is just something to kind of get ahead of the curve, so to speak, so that we're ready to move a little quicker. So staff recommendation is to pass the motion tonight. And just as a kind of a side note, no contract can be awarded above this amount. So this is in line with what our budget is, which is floating around, I think, $1.2 million. So we would not be able to award anything over $500,000 without coming back to council. So just a little bit of background there. And I believe that's all I have.
All right, any questions for Mr. Bradley? Mr. Snyder?
Yeah, could you be more specific about what we're really contracting for here?
Yes, so our HVAC contractor provides just the HVAC equipment, so the air handler unit, chiller, boiler, and we'll demo and install those. So this HIT contract is going to be new, I'll call it plumbing, but it's the piping, vaulting ceilings, installing new pads to put the new units on, whether they're exterior, interior, new control units, kind of the wires to and from, if you will, drywall patching, kind of, I mean, the list goes on and on, but I hope that gives you some background.
So my question didn't go to the sort of the technical issues, but is this a contract for multiple HVAC systems, maintenance and repair? What is this contract with HIT? Is it just one work order, which is the HVAC at the community center, or are we being asked to authorize other work as long as it doesn't go up to $500,000 each order? I'm trying to figure out the structure here of what we're authorizing.
Yeah, so let's see. Maybe a better way to explain this is that to complete the community center HVAC rehab, we will have 2 contracts. One will be with a HVAC mechanical supplier. That one we already have in place. It's been in place for a bit. I can't quite remember the background behind it. And then we would have a kind of a, I'll call it a JOC contract. It's a job order contract with who we're proposing tonight would be HIT. That JOC contract would supply construction management services, so it would be the daily inspections, the daily managing of the various different trades involved, and kind of the leftover work. So if you imagine at your house hiring somebody to come in and replace your furnace, heat pump, compressor, whatever you may have, but then you still have to do new penetrations, or you're relocating it and you have to do duct work. That's kind of what HIT will cover, right? So the mechanical contractor unbolts a unit, bolts it back in. Given what we're looking at doing in the community center, you can't just bolt it back in. You have to reroute duct work, you have to move ceilings around, you have to install concrete pads for new components and supporting the new system. So HIT does kind of all of that work in this scenario, so that a contractor can unbolt a unit in location A and bolt its replacement into location B. Does that make it a little clearer?
Yeah, it does on that particular project. So we're just basically tonight, we're approving the expenditure of money for HIT for one project, because the phrasing is very broad.
Yes, it would be for one project. There is no maintenance associated with this. So once it's installed, we would default back to our on-call maintenance contracts. And we do not have any other HVAC contracts or anything like that. In theory, it's a JOC contract, so it's kind of an on-call contract. So in theory, we could reach out to HIT to do an AC unit install at the property yard or something like that. Not that that's terribly feasible or could be done, but just as kind of an example.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Ms. Conley?
Mr. Bradley, so the last time we had a contract with HIT, it was for this building, and we ran into a lot of hiccups along the way. And I just want to check and make sure that we're not going to run into those same hiccups, that this contract will be written in such a way that everything will be clear going into it, so that we're not going to end up in that same situation we did with this building.
No, everything would be clear. I don't expect the same situation. I will say that not everything in City Hall was HIT's fault. Some of that blame comes onto the city and DPW staff and whatnot. Lessons learned from that experience, and I do feel confident that this will go very well, especially compared to City Hall.
Thanks, and I agree. It's a lessons learned thing. So if we're going to step into a contract with the same company, we need to look at what the problems were and move forward. Thanks.
Other comments?
Mr. Mayor, since we're on that topic, I would be interested in seeing what the lessons learned were from the City Hall work. Thanks.
Just one question. By awarding this contract, are you accelerating the ability to deliver installation of that HVAC to the community center and citizens?
In a sense, yes. This contract allows us to work with HIT to develop costs and do some preliminary I don't want to call it engineering because it's not engineering. The kind of preliminary cost estimating and investigation inside of the building that would otherwise need to be procured separately and not at the same time as having material on order and whatnot. So I'm not going to sit here and say it saves 1 or 2 years, but it does save a few months of time to kind of expedite and keep the project moving.
Okay, thanks.
Just not to belabor this indefinitely, but let me ask just a quick question. So I presume, is this system basically the same system, just sort of a more modern system, or did we consider things like geothermal or other ways that may be more environmentally friendly and maybe cost effective in the long run?
Yeah, we have looked at a few different systems. We're still kind of up in the air, but we do have it down to, I think, primarily 2 systems. There's still a couple others that we're looking at, but the 2 systems we're looking at in detail. The first one replaces the system in kind, boilers and chillers, everything would stay on natural gas as it is today. The other system we're looking at is removing the natural gas and upgrading, or I shouldn't say upgrading, but changing everything out to electric. That has some challenges to it. The biggest one, we have to double the electric feed that comes into the community center. So there's a lot of work with Dominion. There's some long lead time items associated with that. I don't have any costs or anything to share with you today, but just kind of background on the two options that are being investigated in detail right now.
No thought to geothermal?
Not to date, no.
I would definitely recommend at least giving a look to it. I mean, you may know more than I do. You probably, I'm sure, do. But it seems to me like that's a very environmentally friendly system that also has fewer moving parts and might offer long-term benefit for the city. So maybe I just suggest you at least take a cursory look at that.
Yes, we can do a quick look at that.
Thank you. My colleague just mentioned solar as well. Maybe solar as well. Maybe there's a component that could be done with that also.
Solar, we're super limited on. The roof of the building can't handle the weight of the panels. And with the trees in the surrounding area, we don't have room for them. So any solar on the building would be very minimal.
Got it. Well, maybe geothermal is something you could take a look at and see if that works or even close to working. But anyway, so do we have a motion regarding this matter? Any public comment? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Do we have a motion regarding this item?
Move to authorize the purchasing agent on behalf of the city to award job orders under an existing agreement with HIT Inc. for job order contracting services and to expend up to $500,000 for each job order, subject to appropriation of funds by City Council in the budget.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Either one.
What's that? Let's Ms. Conley on the second. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yeah.
Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Any business not on the agenda? Standing committee reports, liaison reports? Okay.
ABC is scheduled for Thursday, right, Mr. Duncan?
Yes, we are scheduled for Thursday at 1 o'clock. There's nothing else. The vote to set the holiday schedule causes me to ask those who are making our schedule for next year to give us the earliest possible signal on whether council will have its first meeting in 2023 on Tuesday, January 3rd, or whether we'll move the first meeting to the next Monday.
All right.
So when you guys talk about that, decide. Also, I just wanted to add, maybe others know this, but I just got into town, so I'm just now finding out that Edna Frady, who is a familiar name to many of us here, and Edna is well known by some of us old timers, died at Goodwin House on Friday. She had been a resident of Goodwin House for some number of years, but of course she spent most of her life in the City of Falls Church and was the daughter of the Director of Public Works, Don Frady, after whom Frady Park is named. So I just want to extend council's condolences on that news.
Thank you. Other comments, other questions, statements? Okay, is there nothing else? All right, we will adjourn this meeting then. Good evening.
Thank you, council.
We were betting on what time we would.
9:25, man. Closest without going over? Is that Yeah.
So does the winner buy everybody else?
I think everyone else needs
Too much sitting. Exactly. It's too much.
Well, I know it was so busy.
Oh, yes.
Eating at night.
You have plenty of.
Yeah, and what I didn't realize was when I said that.
Yeah, next week is that narrative on the school board thing. Maybe.
Tell me what your idea would be.